"Please don't hurt me," the Comanche girl whispered, but what the cowboy did broke his soul. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and wildflowers. Birds were returning to their nests, and the distant howl of a coyote echoed faintly across the empty fields. In this quiet evening, a young Comanche girl moved cautiously, hugging the edge of a small grove of trees. Her dark hair fell in loose strands around her face, and her eyes, wide with fear, darted constantly from side to side. Every rustle of the grass, every snapping twig made her heart leap. She whispered to herself, "I hope no one finds me. I just want to be safe." She had been separated from her family earlier in the day. The chaos of a sudden raid had scattered the people she loved most, leaving her alone and trembling in the wilderness. Her small frame shook not just from the cold evening air, but from the terror of being alone in a world she didn't fully understand. Each step she took was careful, calculated, almost invisible, like she was trying to become one with the shadows. She knew the plains could be beautiful, but in moments like this, they were dangerous and endless. Meanwhile, a cowboy rode along the distant ridge, his horse moving steadily, kicking up soft clouds of dust with each step. He was a man of the plains, tall and lean, with weathered skin that told the story of years spent under the unforgiving sun. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, shadowing his face, but his gaze was sharp, alert to every sound and movement in the land around him. Life on the plains was never easy, and he had learned to notice things others might miss. The way a bird suddenly takes flight, the way the grass bends unnaturally, the faint scent of smoke on the wind. As he rode closer to the grove, he noticed something moving among the trees. At first it could have been a deer or a rabbit, but the figure seemed too deliberate, too human. He slowed his horse, squinting in the fading light. Then he saw her, small, hunched, and trembling. His heart clenched slightly. She looked so fragile, so out of place, and there was a fear in her eyes that he recognized, though he did not know her story. "Hey there," he called softly, raising a hand in a gesture meant to show he meant no harm. The girl froze, her eyes widening even more. "I won't hurt you," he added quickly, sensing her panic. She shook her head, backing up slightly, pressing herself closer to the trees. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her words were almost lost in the breeze, but they carried enough fear and sincerity to reach him. The cowboy dismounted carefully, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. His boots crunched softly on the dry grass as he took a few steps toward her. He kept his hands visible, knowing that sudden movements could make her flee. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again gently. "You're safe here. Just stay where you are, okay?" For a long moment she said nothing. She studied him, her large brown eyes searching for any hint of deceit, any reason to trust him. Trust did not come easily. In the short time she had been on her own, she had learned that not everyone on the plains was kind, and many would take advantage of someone as small and alone as she was. But something in the way he spoke, in the calmness of his tone, told her he might be different. She hesitated, then took a tiny step forward, her bare feet crunching on the dry grass. He noticed how careful she was, how every movement was measured, as if she were weighing the risks of every decision. He realized how exhausted she must be and how frightening it must have been to be alone all day. "My name's Samuel," he said quietly. "What's yours?" For a moment, she seemed frozen by the question. She wasn't used to strangers asking her name with kindness. Finally she whispered, "Ahioka." It was a soft, melodic name, and it seemed to hang in the air between them. Samuel nodded gently. "Ahioka, okay. It's nice to meet you. I can help you find some food and a place to rest if you want." He paused, giving her space to respond. The girl's lips pressed together tightly, as if she were considering his offer, weighing it against every story she had ever been told about strangers. She glanced around nervously, the wind tugging at her hair, the shadows of the trees stretching long and dark. I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted in a small voice. Everyone is gone." Her voice cracked and a tear ran down her cheek. Samuel felt a pang of empathy. He had seen enough loss in his own life to understand the weight of such words. He took a small step closer, careful not to startle her. "Then I'll stay with you until you figure out what to do next," he said softly. "You don't have to be alone tonight." The girl's eyes flicked to his, searching for any hint of insincerity. Seeing none, she nodded slowly, her small shoulders sagging in relief. Together, they moved toward a small clearing where the grass was slightly shorter, and the shadows of the trees offered some privacy. Samuel helped her gather a few fallen branches for a fire. He was careful to let her do most of it herself, knowing she needed to feel some control over her own safety. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the sky, the girl finally allowed herself to relax just a little. She sat down near the small fire Samuel had started, rubbing her hands together for warmth. The flames cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the fear and the strength that had carried her this far. Samuel sat across from her, keeping a respectful distance. He knew that trust could not be forced, it had to be earned, one small step at a time. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to speak more freely. "I used to run with my family," she said quietly. "We would travel together and my father would teach me how to find water and food, but today I got lost." Her voice was almost a whisper, as if saying it out loud might make the memory hurt too much. Samuel listened, nodding gently. He understood enough about the land and the times to know that her story, though simple, was filled with danger and resilience. As darkness fell and the fire crackled, a sense of fragile calm settled over them. Samuel watched the girl carefully, impressed by her courage despite the fear that clung to her like a second skin. He felt a mix of responsibility and protectiveness, knowing that the night ahead would be long and uncertain. The plains were beautiful, but they could also be unforgiving, and he was determined to ensure she made it through this first night safely. Though neither of them spoke much more, there was an unspoken understanding growing between them. In this vast, wild land, two lost souls had found a moment of connection, and it was enough to carry them through the shadows of the coming night. Samuel knew that helping her would not be easy and that challenges lay ahead. But for now, he simply watched over her, and she allowed herself, just a little, to believe that she might be safe after all. The stars twinkled above, and the wind continued its gentle song across the plains. In the quiet, Samuel thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought him here, and about the small, brave girl who had whispered words of fear that had touched something deep inside him. And for the first time that evening, both of them felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps they could face the uncertainty together. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the plains, spilling soft light across the grasses and painting everything in gentle gold. Birds chirped cheerfully in the trees, and the world seemed peaceful, almost untouched by the hardships that often came with life on the frontier. Samuel and the young Comanche girl, Ahioka, sat together near the small clearing where they had spent the night. Smoke from the fire curled lazily into the sky, and the warmth of the sun began to chase away the chill of dawn. Ahioka stirred, blinking her dark eyes as if waking from a long, uneasy dream. She rubbed her hands together, feeling the stiffness of the cold night. Samuel, already up, was moving carefully, gathering water from a nearby stream and arranging some small branches to rebuild the fire. His movements were calm, steady, and practiced, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. He glanced at Ahioka and smiled softly. "Morning," he said. "Did you sleep at all?" Ahioka hesitated, then nodded. "A little," she whispered. "I kept thinking maybe you would leave." Samuel shook his head gently. "I'm not going anywhere. You're safe with me, at least for now." He handed her a small piece of dried bread he had brought with him. "Eat something. It will help you feel stronger." She took the bread slowly, looking at it as if it were a treasure. The warmth of the sun on her face and the sound of Samuel's voice made her feel a little more at ease. She nibbled at the bread, grateful for the simple comfort, and for the first time in what felt like days, allowed herself a small sigh of relief. They spent the morning quietly, talking in soft voices. Samuel asked her about her family, her village, and the life she had known before she became lost. Ahioka spoke cautiously, as if testing whether it was safe to share her memories. She described the wide rivers where her family would fish, the small fires they would gather around at night, and the gentle teachings of her father, who had shown her how to find water, identify safe plants, and track the movements of animals. Samuel listened carefully, nodding and occasionally asking questions, careful not to interrupt or overwhelm her. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Samuel suggested they take a short walk along the nearby trail. "It's good to stretch your legs," he said. "And I can show you a few safe places nearby where we can rest or find water if we need it." Ahioka hesitated at first, but then nodded, feeling a sense of curiosity mixed with trust. They walked slowly together, the tall grasses brushing against their legs, the wind whispering around them. Samuel pointed out safe spots, explained which plants were edible, and showed her how to spot signs of animals or water sources in the distance. His voice was calm and steady, filled with patience and kindness. During their walk, Ahioka began to ask questions as well. "How did you learn all of this?" she asked. "About the land, the animals, everything," Samuel chuckled softly. "I've lived here for a long time. My parents taught me some, and I learned the rest by paying attention. The land has its own lessons if you're willing to listen." Ahioka considered this. "It's like your eyes and ears are always awake," she said thoughtfully. Mine weren't always." Samuel smiled gently. "That's okay. You'll learn. You're already very observant. You noticed things yesterday that I didn't even think of." They spent the morning exploring slowly, stopping occasionally to rest near a cool stream or a shady tree. Samuel taught her how to skim stones across the water and how to notice subtle changes in the landscape. Ahioka began to relax, laughing softly at some of her mistakes, and for the first time, she felt a sense of wonder in the world around her rather than just fear. By midday, they returned to their small clearing for lunch. Samuel had brought a few more pieces of dried bread and some fresh water, and they shared a quiet meal. As Ahioka ate, she noticed Samuel watching the horizon carefully, his eyes scanning the distance even while he smiled at her. "Are you worried about something?" she asked. Samuel paused before answering. "I'm always aware of the land," he said carefully. "There are people, animals, things that could cause trouble. I just need to know we're prepared." Ahioka nodded, trying to understand. She felt comforted that he was looking out for her, even if she didn't fully understand everything he meant. The connection between them grew stronger as the morning passed, a fragile but important trust forming between two people from very different worlds. As the afternoon wore on, clouds began to gather in the sky. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the tall grasses in a soft, continuous hum. Samuel noticed the change immediately. "Looks like the weather might change soon," he said. "We should make sure we're ready if it rains or gets windy." Ahioka followed him as he reinforced their small clearing, making a simple shelter with branches and leaves. She helped as best she could, feeling a sense of pride and usefulness. For the first time in days, she felt like she was contributing, like she had some control over her own safety. Afterward, they sat together under the makeshift shelter, listening to the wind pick up and watching the clouds roll across the sky. The sense of calm they had felt in the morning was now mixed with a quiet tension. Samuel explained that it was normal for weather to change quickly on the plains, and that it was important to always be prepared. Ahioka nodded, absorbing every word carefully. As they waited, Samuel told her a few stories about his own life, carefully leaving out the painful details. He spoke of his family, his travels across the plains, and the small lessons he had learned along the way. Ahioka listened intently, her eyes wide, realizing that although he came from a different world than hers, he too had faced challenges and fears. She felt a little less alone, understanding that everyone had their own struggles, even those who seemed strong on the outside. Hours passed and the clouds grew darker, hinting at rain. Samuel stood and gathered a few more branches to strengthen their shelter. "We'll be safe here," he said reassuringly. "Nothing will hurt us if we stay alert." Ahioka felt a small smile form on her face. She realized that despite the fear and uncertainty, she was learning to trust someone again. She had been alone for so long, and the idea that someone genuinely cared about her safety felt strange, yet comforting. As the first drops of rain began to fall, they huddled together under the shelter. The sound of rain hitting the leaves above them was soothing, and Ahioka felt a rare sense of peace. Samuel kept a watchful eye on the surrounding area, but he also allowed himself a moment to enjoy the quiet companionship of the girl who had wandered into his life. That night, as the rain continued to fall, they built a small fire under the shelter, careful to keep it low and protected. The warmth of the fire and the sound of the rain created a safe cocoon around them. Samuel shared a few more simple meals with Ahioka, and they talked quietly about the day. She spoke of her dreams, of the small hopes she still held despite the losses she had suffered. Samuel listened, offering gentle encouragement and guidance. By the time the rain stopped, darkness had settled across the plains once again. The stars peeked out from behind the clouds, twinkling softly in the clear night sky. Samuel and Ahioka sat together, feeling a bond growing between them. It was a bond built on trust, understanding, and shared experience, a fragile but powerful connection that gave them both strength. Samuel knew that challenges would come, and that protecting Ahioka would not be easy. But for now, in this quiet moment after a day of small victories and learning, they could rest. They had survived the first real challenge together, and that gave them hope. Hope that, despite the uncertainties of the world around them, they could face what lay ahead as a team. Ahioka leaned slightly against Samuel, feeling the warmth of another human being and the comfort of someone who truly cared. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself to believe that she might not be completely alone in this world. And Samuel, watching the young girl with her brave heart and cautious trust, felt a quiet determination that no matter what came next, he would do his best to keep her safe. The plains were still wild and unpredictable, but in this small corner, under the shelter of branches and the soft glow of a fire, two souls found companionship and hope. And as the night stretched on, Samuel silently vowed that tomorrow, and every day after, he would continue to help Ahioka navigate the challenges of the world, and perhaps, in doing so, find a bit of healing for himself as well. The next morning, the plains were quiet once more, though the air carried the scent of wet earth and fresh grass from the rain. The sun peeked over the horizon in soft streaks of gold and pink, warming the damp ground and painting everything in gentle light. Samuel and Ahioka had spent the night under their shelter, resting on soft moss and dry leaves. They woke slowly, stretching tired muscles, their spirits buoyed by the safety of another night spent together. Ahioka rose first, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. She watched Samuel gather water from the small stream nearby, his movements careful and deliberate, as always. Though she had grown used to his presence, she still marveled at how calm and confident he seemed in the face of the wild plains. Samuel noticed her watching and gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Did you sleep well?" I think so," she replied, her voice still soft with caution. It felt strange to have someone else here, but not in a bad way. Samuel nodded, offering her a small piece of bread. "You're getting stronger every day. Little by little, you'll feel more comfortable out here." Ahioka took the bread and nibbled at it, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on her shoulders. She had begun to realize that while the plains could be frightening, there was also a rhythm to life here, a way to understand the land if one paid attention. Samuel had started teaching her that rhythm, and she found herself absorbing his lessons with curiosity and care. After their simple breakfast, Samuel suggested they continue their exploration of the nearby area. "I want you to learn a little more about how to be safe," he said gently. "There are people and animals out here. Most are harmless, but we have to be careful." Ahioka nodded. She had learned enough from her past experiences to understand the need for caution, but she also trusted Samuel. Together, they moved through the tall grasses, Samuel pointing out signs in the land that indicated water, animals, or changes in the weather. Ahioka's eyes were wide with interest as she watched his movements, noticing the small details she had missed before, the bend of a branch, the tracks in soft soil, the way the wind shifted around hills. As they walked, they came across a small herd of deer grazing near a thicket of trees. Ahioka gasped softly, her eyes shining with wonder. "They're so close," she whispered. Samuel nodded. "Yes, they won't notice us if we stay calm and move slowly. Watch how they move, how they eat. You can learn a lot just by watching quietly." For a long while, they crouched behind a fallen log, observing the deer. Ahioka learned to notice the subtle signals, the flick of an ear, the movement of the tail that indicated the animal's feelings. Samuel watched her carefully, proud of how attentive she was. Her small victories, these tiny lessons in understanding the land, reminded him of the resilience she carried inside her. But as the day wore on, the sky began to darken again, heavier this time, as if a storm were approaching. The wind picked up, moving swiftly through the grasses, carrying the distant sound of rolling clouds. Samuel's brow furrowed. "We need to head back to the clearing," he said. "It might rain hard and the wind could make the plains more dangerous." Ahioka nodded, and together they moved quickly but carefully, keeping an eye on the clouds and the movement of the grasses. The storm approached faster than they expected, and soon the first drops of rain began to fall. Samuel guided Ahioka to a small grove of trees that offered some shelter, though it was not as secure as their clearing. He looked around, considering the options, and then made a decision. "We'll stay here for a little while," he said. "The rain is coming fast, but it shouldn't last too long. We need to stay calm and wait it out." Ahioka shivered slightly, not from the cold but from the uncertainty. The wind had a strange howl as it passed through the trees, and the rain fell steadily, making the ground slippery. Samuel noticed her fear and knelt down beside her. "It's okay," he said softly. "Nothing will hurt us here. Just stay close and we'll be fine." The storm continued to build, and as it did, Samuel noticed movement in the distance, figures approaching along the path they had taken earlier. He squinted, trying to make out who or what they might be. His heart sank slightly as he realized that they were likely other travelers or settlers, and he could not predict their intentions. Some people could be kind, but others might not understand the situation, and the presence of a young girl could draw questions or concern. He faced a moral dilemma. Should he stay hidden and risk confrontation, or attempt to signal and explain, hoping the strangers would be understanding? Either choice carried risks, but he knew he had to protect Ahioka first and foremost. He whispered to her, "Stay behind me and don't speak. We'll handle this together." Ahioka nodded, her trust in him unwavering, even as fear bubbled quietly inside her. Samuel stepped carefully into view, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. The figures in the distance slowed, and Samuel saw that they were a group of travelers seeking shelter from the storm. They had not noticed Ahioka at first, and Samuel realized that revealing her presence could help them, but it could also place her in a delicate situation. He took a deep breath. "Hello there," he called, keeping his voice calm. "We're just looking for a safe place to wait out the rain." The travelers paused, studying him. Samuel kept his eyes open for any sign of aggression, but he also remained honest. He did not lie or exaggerate. He simply explained their situation, carefully omitting details that might complicate things for Ahioka. As the travelers approached, Ahioka peered cautiously from behind Samuel. One of them, a woman with a kind face, noticed the small figure hiding in the shadows. "Is there a child with you?" she asked softly, concern in her voice. Samuel nodded slightly, motioning for Ahioka to come forward. "Yes," he said. "She's safe, but I want to make sure she stays that way." The woman smiled gently at Ahioka. "It's okay," she said. "You're safe here." Ahioka's shoulders relaxed slightly, and she allowed herself to step out from behind Samuel. She noticed the warmth in the woman's eyes, the softness of her voice, and for a moment she felt a flicker of hope. She realized that not all strangers were dangerous, and that kindness could exist even in unexpected places. Samuel, watching closely, felt a mixture of relief and continued caution. The moral dilemma weighed on him. He wanted to protect Ahioka, but he also knew that she could benefit from the kindness of others. He had to balance caution with trust, understanding that teaching her about the world also meant showing her that there could be safety and goodness, even among strangers. The travelers offered them some dry cloth and a small amount of food, and Samuel accepted graciously, keeping an eye on the sky as the storm continued. The rain fell harder now, tapping rhythmically on the leaves and creating small puddles on the ground. Samuel guided Ahioka to a drier spot under a thick tree, and she sat quietly, feeling the gentle protection of both the natural world and the people nearby. As the afternoon passed, Samuel talked to the travelers, learning that they were headed toward a nearby settlement. They offered advice about safe paths and where to find shelter, which Samuel listened to carefully. He weighed their words, understanding that some of their suggestions could help them, while others might lead to unnecessary risks. Every decision had consequences, and he was determined to make the right ones for Ahioka's safety. By evening, the rain began to ease, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air. The clouds parted slightly, revealing patches of blue sky and the first hints of stars. Samuel and Ahioka, along with the travelers, prepared to move a short distance to a safer clearing nearby. Ahioka walked close to Samuel, her hand brushing lightly against his sleeve as if to affirm the bond that had grown between them. The day's experiences had been challenging, but they had also been educational. Ahioka had learned to trust not only Samuel, but also the possibility of kindness in others. Samuel had been reminded that even in a world filled with uncertainty, it was possible to make careful choices that balanced safety with humanity. As night fell over the plains, they settled in a small, protected area, the travelers continuing on toward their own path. Samuel and Ahioka sat quietly, watching the stars emerge one by one. The storm had tested them, forcing Samuel to make difficult decisions and Ahioka to face uncertainty, but together they had navigated it safely. Ahioka leaned slightly against Samuel, feeling the reassurance of his presence. "Thank you," she whispered softly, "for keeping me safe and helping me see that the world isn't only scary." Samuel smiled gently, resting his hand lightly on hers. "You're brave," he said. "And you're learning quickly. The world can be frightening, yes, but it can also be beautiful, and sometimes it's our choices that make it safe for each other." That night under the open sky, Samuel and Ahioka fell asleep feeling a little stronger, a little wiser, and more connected. The plains were still vast and unpredictable, but they had faced the first true challenge together, learning that trust, careful thinking, and compassion could guide them through uncertainty. The next morning, the plains were calm again, but a quiet tension lingered in the air. Samuel and Ahioka had moved to a small clearing further along the trail, guided by the advice of the travelers they had met during the storm. The earth was still damp from the previous day's rain, and the grasses glistened with tiny droplets that reflected the morning sun. Birds chirped energetically, and the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush reminded them that life continued, even after the storm. Samuel and Ahioka spent the early hours gathering water and preparing a small breakfast of bread and berries. Ahioka had grown more confident in helping Samuel with these tasks. She moved with care, picking the ripest berries and washing them in the stream, her small hands steady despite the nervousness that lingered in her chest. Samuel watched her closely, feeling a mixture of pride and protectiveness. She had endured so much already, and he wanted to ensure that the days ahead would teach her strength without overwhelming her with fear. As they worked, Samuel noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. A small group of people had arrived, their horses kicking up dust as they dismounted. Samuel's heart tightened. He knew that not all people on the plains could be trusted, and the sight of strangers near Ahioka made him immediately alert. He had to make a choice quickly: hide and risk discovery, or step forward and face the strangers with honesty. He took a deep breath and called out in a calm, measured voice, "Hello, we mean no harm. We're just looking for a safe place to rest for a while." The strangers paused, observing them carefully. Samuel noticed that one of the men stepped forward slightly, his expression serious but not unkind. "Who is with you?" he asked. Samuel motioned toward Ahioka, who had moved behind him instinctively. "She's a young girl. I'm helping her. She's safe with me." The man's eyes softened slightly and he gave a small nod. "We understand. We don't want trouble, but the plains can be dangerous and a child shouldn't be alone." Samuel felt a mix of relief and concern. On one hand, these people could help, but on the other hand, introducing them to Ahioka meant she might have to face questions and decisions she wasn't ready for. He realized that he had to make a choice that would balance safety, trust, and protection. He knelt beside Ahioka, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "They won't hurt us," he said gently, "but you might need to talk to them. It's okay to be honest, and I'll be right here with you." Ahioka hesitated, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She had grown used to Samuel's calm guidance and the security he provided, and the thought of facing strangers without the safety of their usual routine made her nervous. After a moment, she nodded, trusting him completely. Samuel stood and greeted the strangers more fully, introducing himself and explaining their situation. "We've been traveling the plains together," he said. "She's been separated from her family, and I'm helping her stay safe until we can find a proper place for her." The strangers listened carefully, and one of the women stepped forward with a gentle smile. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "It's not easy to protect someone, especially a child in these parts. We can help you find a safer path to the nearest settlement." Samuel felt a weight lift from his chest. He had been carrying the responsibility of keeping Ahioka safe alone, and now he realized that there was help available. But he also knew that the decision to accept help meant trusting not only these strangers, but also that they would respect Ahioka's well-being. It was a moral choice he could not take lightly. He looked at Ahioka, who was watching him silently. "Do you want to go with them?" he asked softly. "It could make things easier for you." Ahioka shook her head slightly. I don't want to leave you," she whispered. "You've helped me and I trust you. I don't know them." Samuel's heart tightened. He understood her fear, and he also knew that protecting her sometimes meant making difficult decisions where trust and caution had to coexist. He had to weigh what was safest for her against what she wanted emotionally. After a long moment of thought, Samuel made his choice. "We'll stay together for now," he said firmly. "I'll guide us to safety and we'll take each step carefully, but I promise we'll make good choices along the way. You won't be alone." Ahioka's eyes filled with relief, and she hugged his arm lightly. Samuel felt a mixture of pride, concern, and determination. He realized that this choice, while it might be difficult, was the right one for both of them. It honored her trust while also keeping her safe. As the day wore on, Samuel led Ahioka along a carefully chosen path, moving quietly and observing the surroundings. They avoided areas where strangers or animals might pose a risk and chose routes that offered both visibility and cover. Samuel taught Ahioka how to notice small signs in the land, broken twigs, footprints in the soil, distant sounds that could indicate potential danger. She absorbed every lesson eagerly, her confidence growing with each step. By midday, they reached a small hill overlooking a valley. Samuel stopped and gestured for Ahioka to sit beside him. "We'll rest here for a while," he said. "It's important to take breaks and notice our surroundings." Ahioka watched the valley below, dotted with patches of trees and streams glinting in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "but it's also big and scary." Samuel nodded. "Yes, it can be both. The world is full of challenges, but it's also full of beauty. Learning to see both is part of growing stronger." They rested in silence for a few moments, listening to the wind rustle through the grasses and the distant call of a bird. Samuel's thoughts wandered to the choices he had made, the decisions that had brought them to this point. He realized that protecting Ahioka was not just about physical safety, but also about guiding her emotionally, helping her understand trust, courage, and the value of careful choices. As they prepared to continue, Samuel noticed movement on the far side of the valley. A small group of travelers was approaching, but this time, the distance and angle allowed him to observe them without immediate interaction. He saw that they were friendly but unaware of Ahioka's presence. He faced another moral decision. Should he approach them and risk drawing attention, or stay hidden and continue moving carefully? He looked at Ahioka, who was watching the distant figures with curiosity. "We'll move quietly and avoid them for now," he said softly. "It's safer this way." Ahioka nodded, understanding the reasoning behind the choice. She had learned that safety often required patience, observation, and careful decision-making. Together, they moved through the grasses, keeping low and staying out of sight. Samuel pointed out small signs to Ahioka, changes in the wind, footprints, and the distant sounds of the travelers, so she could begin to understand how to assess risk herself. By evening, they reached a small grove with a clear stream and a gentle slope that offered natural shelter. Samuel and Ahioka set up a small fire and prepared a simple meal of bread and berries. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Samuel reflected on the day's events. He realized that the choices he had made, deciding when to trust, when to hide, and when to act, were shaping not only Ahioka's safety but also her understanding of the world. He had to balance caution with compassion, guidance with respect, and protection with freedom. Each decision weighed heavily on him, but he also felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing he was doing his best. Ahioka, sitting quietly beside him, noticed the thoughtful expression on his face. "Are you worried?" she asked softly. Samuel smiled gently. "A little," he admitted, "but that's normal. When we care about someone, we think about what's best for them. That's why we make careful choices." Ahioka considered his words and nodded. "I understand. I trust you to help me make the right choices." Samuel's heart warmed at her words. He realized that this bond of trust was as important as the safety he provided. Guiding her through the challenges of the plains was not only about survival, but also about teaching her to face the world with courage and wisdom. As the night settled over the plains, Samuel and Ahioka sat quietly by the fire. The stars twinkled above, and the gentle sound of the stream nearby created a calm, peaceful atmosphere. They had faced another day of challenges, and though the path ahead was uncertain, they knew they would face it together. In that moment, Samuel understood that the greatest responsibility was not just to protect Ahioka from harm, but to help her grow, to help her understand that the world could be navigated with care, trust, and courage. And as he watched her, small and brave, leaning slightly against him, he knew that the choices he had made, even the hardest ones, were shaping not only her journey but also his own. The next morning, the plains were calm and bright, the soft sunlight spilling over the rolling hills and glimmering across the grasses. Samuel and Ahioka had risen early, eager to make the most of the quiet day. The storm from days before had left the air fresh and cool, and the world seemed renewed, as if it too were healing from the challenges they had faced. Ahioka moved slowly, brushing her dark hair from her face and stretching her small arms. She glanced at Samuel, who was already gathering water from a nearby stream. He moved with his usual care, making sure to stay alert to the land around them. Though the days had been difficult, a sense of accomplishment and trust now surrounded them. They had faced storms, strangers, and uncertainty together and had survived. Samuel noticed her watching and smiled gently. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Ahioka nodded. "Yes, I think I'm getting used to mornings out here," she said softly. "They don't feel as scary as before." Samuel's heart lifted at her words. She had grown stronger each day, learning to read the land, to move carefully, and to trust not only him but also her own instincts. "That's good," he said. "Each day you learn a little more, and each day you're getting braver." They began their journey across the plains, following a path Samuel had chosen with care. He explained the landmarks, the small hills, streams, and clusters of trees that would guide them safely toward the nearest settlement. Ahioka walked beside him, her small feet moving quickly over the damp grass, her eyes wide with curiosity. She was learning that the world was both challenging and beautiful, and that each step could teach her something new. Along the way, they came across a small herd of rabbits darting through the underbrush. Ahioka gasped softly, her eyes lighting up with wonder. Samuel knelt beside her. "Watch carefully," he said. "See how they move quietly and quickly. They're careful, but they're also curious. There's a lesson in that for us." Ahioka nodded, studying the animals. "We can be careful but still curious?" she asked. "Yes," Samuel replied. "That's how we learn and grow, careful but willing to explore." As they continued walking, Samuel noticed a distant plume of smoke rising from the horizon. He pointed it out to Ahioka. "That could be a settlement," he said. "Or someone who has built a fire for the day. We'll move carefully, but it's a good sign that help is near." Ahioka's eyes widened. She had not seen signs of human life for days, and the thought of finding others both excited and worried her. "Do you think people will be nice to me?" she asked softly. Samuel smiled reassuringly. "Some people will, most want to help, but we'll stay cautious and we'll make sure we're safe. That's what we've learned together." As they approached the area, they could see a few small cabins and smoke rising from chimneys. Samuel guided Ahioka along a hidden path, staying just out of sight until they could assess the situation. He wanted to make sure that it was safe before revealing themselves. Finally, they reached the edge of the settlement. Samuel called out in a calm voice, explaining who they were and that they meant no harm. The people of the settlement appeared cautiously but warmly, listening carefully as Samuel described their journey and the circumstances that had brought Ahioka here. Ahioka stepped forward slightly, her small hand brushing against Samuel's sleeve for reassurance. She had grown used to his guidance, and now, even as new faces appeared, she felt a measure of courage and trust. The settlers smiled gently at her, offering food, fresh water, and clean blankets. They asked her about her family, and Samuel explained what he could, careful to protect her feelings while telling the truth. The kindness of the people reminded Ahioka that not everyone in the world was dangerous, and that it was possible to trust again. She felt a mix of relief, curiosity, and hope. Samuel watched her closely, noting the way her eyes brightened at the small comforts, the warmth of the fire, the smell of fresh bread, and the gentle voices of people who wanted to help. After a quiet meal, Samuel took Ahioka aside. "We have to think about what comes next," he said gently. "This settlement can give you safety, food, and shelter, but you have choices too. You can stay here for a while, or we can continue traveling until you find a place that feels like home. Ahioka thought carefully. She had grown to trust Samuel deeply, but she also realized that the settlement could provide stability and comfort that the plains could not. After a long pause, she spoke softly. I want to stay here for now. It feels safe, and I feel like I can learn more. Samuel nodded, understanding her choice. That's a wise decision, he said. Safety is important, and so is learning. You've come a long way, Ahioka, and you deserve to have a place where you can rest and grow. The people of the settlement welcomed them both warmly, understanding the bond that had formed between the cowboy and the young girl. They offered Samuel a place to rest as well, though he knew that his role as her guide and protector had reached a point where he could step back without fear. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had made the right choices to keep her safe, guide her, and prepare her for the world ahead. Over the next few days, Ahioka began to adjust to life in the settlement. She learned routines, helped with small chores, and even played with other children, discovering laughter and companionship that she had not experienced in a long time. Samuel continued to visit, teaching her small lessons about the land and sharing gentle guidance. But now she was learning to navigate the world with a measure of independence and confidence. One evening, as the sun set over the settlement, Samuel and Ahioka sat together on a small hill overlooking the valley. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of evening life, birds settling in the trees, the rustle of grass in the wind, and the faint chatter of people in the distance. Ahioka leaned slightly against Samuel, a small smile on her face. I feel stronger now, she said softly. Because of you, because of everything you taught me. Samuel smiled gently. You've always had strength, he said. I just helped you see it for yourself. Remember, courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about moving forward even when you are. Ahioka nodded, thinking about the storms, the strangers, and the long walks they had taken together. She realized that every challenge had taught her something, about the world, about trust, and about herself. And she felt a sense of gratitude and connection that she knew would stay with her forever. Samuel, watching her thoughtful expression, felt a quiet pride and peace. The journey had been difficult, filled with moral choices and uncertainties, but it had also been rewarding. He had kept her safe, guided her, and shared in her growth. And in doing so, he had also discovered something about himself, the quiet satisfaction that comes from helping another person navigate the complexities of the world. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Samuel and Ahioka sat together in silence, the bond between them unspoken but deeply felt. They had traveled the plains, faced challenges, and learned to trust each other. And now, as night settled over the settlement, they could rest, knowing that safety, hope, and new beginnings awaited. In the quiet of the evening, Samuel realized that the journey was never just about reaching a destination. It was about the steps they took together, the lessons learned along the way, and the connections forged in trust, care, and courage. Ahioka had grown stronger, braver, and wiser, and he had been privileged to guide her along the path. Ahioka looked up at the stars, feeling a sense of wonder and possibility. She had survived storms, learned about the land, and discovered that trust could exist even in a world that sometimes seemed frightening. And she knew that with Samuel's guidance, she could face whatever came next with confidence and hope. The plain stretched endlessly beyond the settlement, wild and full of life. But for the first time, Ahioka felt a sense of belonging, safety, and purpose. And Samuel, standing quietly beside her, felt a sense of completion, a feeling that the hardest choices, the careful guidance, and the trust they had built had led to a moment of true peace and understanding. As the night deepened, Samuel and Ahioka watched the stars together, knowing that the world could be faced with courage, kindness, and care. And in that quiet, beautiful moment, Both of them understood that the journey had not only shaped them, but also created a bond that would endure, long after the plains had been crossed.